Robert Isaac Hurt, Robbie to those who knew him best, was a 37-year-old from Ringgold, Virginia. He was a married father of 3 and worked in construction. On the evening of December 9th, 2018, Robbie left a friend's house in an agitated state after recovering from a drug overdose. Robbie's truck was found a mile down the road. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Dentzel, and this is Unfound. The phrase, know thyself, is one of the oldest concepts in philosophy. It predates Freud, the U.S. Constitution, the Magna Carta, the Bible, and ancient Greece. But what does it mean? Well, if I may rip off the freedictionary.com for a moment, know thyself means being aware of your own limitations and knowing what you're capable of doing. In 21st century jargon, know thyself means stay in your lane. However, in saying that two-word phrase, I also think of a topic that once in a while comes up on Unfound. Could a missing person have developed some kind of amnesia and still be out there alive, but he or she doesn't know who he or she really is? There are virtually no stats or studies on the topic. Although there was a story within the last couple years of a guy who was in New Hampshire who ended up in California, claiming he had no idea how he got there. Remember that? I should say, I'm still not convinced that's what happened. Yet all of us have heard of at least one missing persons case that was solved when a person broke out of their amnesiac fugue and contacted their family. Well, in the disappearance of Robbie Hurt, his wife claimed not long before he disappeared that when he would get high, he would forget who he was. In fact, acting as a guest in the house and not its owner. Then Robbie was gone. And we're left to wonder if he is still out there, living in an altered state. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's website, charleyproject.org. Robbie Hurt was a good guy. Nobody disputes that, not even his wife, who kicked him out of their house on the very day Robbie disappeared. He was a great father. He worked hard at his construction jobs. But Robbie just couldn't kick his drug addiction. He attempted many times, but Robbie would then fall back into his bad habits. And when he did, Robbie was unrecognizable, to the point that he didn't even know who he was, taking on other personas. So on December 9th, 2018, Robbie's wife had had enough. She told him to leave after once again finding out he was using. Robbie left without incident, although his wife didn't know where he was going. It turned out that Robbie showed up at the home of another addict friend, Bob, who lived over the state line in North Carolina. There, to hear Bob tell it, Robbie shot up and overdosed. Bob then brought Robbie back to life using Narcan. Yes, Bob seemingly had it just lying around. Once Robbie regained his senses, but still very much out of his mind, he left Bob's, not saying where he was going. He was never seen again. A few days later, after a huge snowstorm, Bob saw Robbie's truck in a ditch a mile from Bob's home. He alerted Robbie's wife. However, the truck yielded no information as to what happened to Robbie. Many of you know what I think about the possibility of a missing person having some kind of mental episode and forgetting who he or she is. It happens, but it is so rare to the point of being immeasurable. Plus, in Robbie's disappearance, there are still many questions that could take us in a different direction. Number one, If Robbie's truck was found just back over the line in Virginia, why did his phone last ping 45 minutes away in Ruffin, North Carolina? Number 2, really, what are the odds that Bob would have Narcan there? And did the police actually verify that? And number 3, what are we to make of Bob's story saying that a Mexican cartel was after Robbie for an unpaid drug debt? Robbie's family is open to any and all possibilities regarding his disappearance at this time. The guest for this episode is Robbie's mother, Becky Griffith. Unfound News. Over the past week, I've uploaded some new videos to YouTube. They are maps explaining the disappearances of Joshua Guimond, Brandy Wells, and Cleshindra Hall. I hope they're helping you get better insight into these cases. If there's anything I can do to improve them, please let me know. Next, my upcoming interview with Dr. Grace Telesco will be happening September 24th. Although we will be using Zoom, I believe the interview will be a live broadcast over YouTube on Nova Southeastern University's channel, and not on their Facebook page like before. I think. I will be sure to get those details to you before it all happens. We will be discussing the disappearance of Eric Alvarado. Finally, although the new Unfound hat gave me some great luck at the disc golf tournament a few weeks ago here in Clearwater, this past weekend in Floral City, not so much. But it's surely my fault, and not the hat's. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Stitcher, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, Deezer, Facebook, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us on our podcast channel for the Unfound Live Show. All of you can talk with me, and I can answer your questions. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. This week, for Patreon, I need to thank Laura. You can also contribute at PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. This week for PayPal, I need to thank Carol. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the mother of Robbie Hurt, Becky Griffith. Becky, welcome to Unfound.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. Let's start here. You are the mother of Robbie. How many children do you have, and what is maybe the age span of them, and where does Robbie fall in line?
Okay, I have 3 children, Jamie, Kelly, and Robbie, 2 boys and a girl. Robbie's the baby, and his sister always called him the golden boy.
All right, I got to ask you why, Becky. Why do they call him the golden boy?
She just loved him so much, and he was had such a good personality, and that he was her golden boy.
I guess they got along. All these siblings got along very well. Sometimes when I maybe hear the term golden boy, it almost sounds maybe like somebody was a little jealous, but it's not like that.
Oh, no. She loved him. She would get aggravated with him sometimes, but she always ended up, she loved him. She's suffering from PTSD now because of this.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, dang. I'm sure I'm going to talk about that, of course, later in the conversation for sure. Once we talk about, we do that in all the interviews. We talk about how a disappearance has affected a family. So we can certainly talk about that before we're done with this interview, for sure. What's the age span, should I say, from your oldest down to Robbie? How many years between them?
With Jamie and Kelly, there was a year and a half, and 3 years to Robbie, from Kelly to Robbie.
All right, so only about 5 years. Only about 5 years from oldest to youngest.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And all of them get along. 5 years difference. All of them get along growing up.
Well, they fought some. When all 3 of them were together, it was a fight. But when just 2 of them was together, they were great.
Okay.
Just,
all right.
They squabbled. Nothing that anybody holds any resentments for now.
Okay. Did they do a lot of things together? Did you go, I know you just came back from a vacation, but did they go on vacation together? Did they do sports or hobbies together, all your kids?
We went to the beach several times, and we loved camping.
Okay.
So, we did a lot of things together.
Okay. Did you have like a tent or RV, or how'd you do it?
Tent.
Okay. All right.
The old-fashioned way.
All right. So Robbie was your youngest, your last born. And
Yes.
What was he into? Was he, just as an individual, let's talk about Robbie, interest in hobbies, into sports, music, hunting and fishing? What was he into?
Well, he loved to play the guitar. And he loved Green Bay Packers. He got to go see a game just right before he disappeared. And he loved carpentry. He loved making things with his hands.
How did he become a Packers fan growing up in your area of the country, Becky?
Well, my oldest son decided that he wanted to pick a team that nobody else liked. And he picked the Green Bay Packers, and then Robbie followed suit.
All right. So, and this is all of you growing up in the Virginia area? Is this where this is?
Virginia.
West Virginia? Okay. Well,
yes.
Being that I'm from Pennsylvania, why didn't you pick the Steelers?
Well, I don't know. My oldest son picked it.
Okay. All right. So he went for the Green Bay Packers. I have nothing against the Packers. Okay.
I think they were the underdog. And none of his friends liked him, or, so he decided that's who he wanted to.
Okay. All right, and I'm a bit of a musician myself with the guitar. Was self-taught guitar, electric guitar, or acoustic?
Well, his father played guitar and had a natural talent for it, and I think Robbie did too. He didn't ever take lessons. But he just could pick it. He picked it up and could play it. But he wouldn't sing. His dad was a singer, but he would not sing. He didn't like his voice. He played acoustic guitar. I don't know of him ever playing an electric.
Okay.
And he was never in a band or anything. It was just recreational.
Neat.
Playing.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Okay. Great. So the Packers. Guitar and carpentry, and I think that construction is something that he eventually got into as his job when he became an adult, right?
Right.
Okay. How long did he do that? First of all, did he graduate from high school? Did he go to college? Anything like that?
No, he didn't graduate from high school, and he didn't go to college.
Okay.
So really there wasn't much to choose from as far as work, and he got with some good people that taught him what they knew. Okay. And he ended up loving it.
Great. Well, you can, you can make good money in construction, of course, depending on how the economy is. If houses are going up, or condominiums, apartments, or business buildings, then that's a good job to have. Of course, he was 37 when he disappeared, but when did he start that as a job, as a late teenager or into his 20s? When did he start?
Probably early 20s.
Early 20s.
And there in Danville, where he lived, they were restoring several old buildings, big buildings, and he really enjoyed that, making the old come new again.
Okay, that's interesting. I have no skills in that area at all, so any person, man or woman, that can do that gets all of my respect. Okay, so he's into that. And so did he work for a company, or was he freelance?
He both. He did work for several different companies. One company he worked for, the guy was the brother to one of the NASCAR drivers. I forget which one it was. But he was there in Danville.
Okay.
And people like that he was just such a personable person. They would take him under their wing, and he would learn so much from them. And then he would decide he's doing real good, and the next thing you know, he celebrated, and that that's what happened.
Okay, and we're going to get into that, of course. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So he's doing construction and helping to refurbishing these buildings, making them new again, which is a very popular work around the United States, especially in older neighborhoods. What about his relationships? Of course, I know that he had some children. One from a relationship before he was married, two after he got married, or before he got married, but to the woman he was married to when he disappeared. But what can you say about maybe the relationship that he had where a child was conceived, his first child?
Okay, he met this girl in Roanoke, Virginia, and she was from here, and so they became fast friends, and they were more friends than anything. But then, because of the baby, they tried to make it work. It was his son Isaac that she had.
Okay, Isaac. And approximately what year was Isaac born?
Oh, goodness. He's 16 now, so.
All right, so 2004, let's say.
Okay.
2004. He was born in 2004, but Robbie and this woman couldn't make it work.
Right.
Okay. And did the mother have custody of Isaac, and did Robbie get to see him quite a bit, or how did that all work out?
Yes, she had custody, and we see him now anytime we want to. She's been very good.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, he was married at the time that he disappeared. How did he meet his wife? And let's just use her first name. What is her first name?
Emily.
Emily. How did Robbie and Emily meet?
I'm not sure, but he met her in Roanoke also. She had moved from Danville to Roanoke to go to school, and he met her there.
Okay. And approximately what year did they get married?
I think it was 2010.
All right. So
their first daughter had already been born.
Okay.
And she is 10 now. So I think that makes it about right.
Yeah, it does. That's good math there, Becky. Good for you.
Got it down.
Okay. So Isaac born 2004. Things don't work out there, and then 6 years later, Robbie gets married to Emily, and they have a child right before that. So 6 years between those children.
Right.
Approximately. Okay. And they had another child after that?
Yes, she's 3.
She's 3. Okay. So, wow, she was only like a year or something old when Robbie disappeared.
Yes.
Okay.
And she was a daddy's girl. They both were.
Mm-hmm.
If Robbie was in the room, she was in his arms.
Wow. Okay. So, like 7 years between children then. That's quite a bit of time. Between 2 kids, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, it was back and forth with him, and I don't think she trusted him. And he had stayed sober for, I guess, a long enough period of time that she was able to trust him, and they had the second child.
Okay, so that was a factor in there. It wasn't like they were trying to conceive again all those years. It was like, well, I want to keep the marriage going for your other child, but I don't know if I want to have another one, given that Robbie had some problems.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, let's just talk about that then. He did have some addictions that like you said, he had been sober for quite a while, and he might have, I guess, as they fallen off the wagon before he disappeared. We'll get into all of that. But when did you first realize maybe that Robbie had gotten into some things he shouldn't have gotten into? How 20 years ago, or when do you think that was?
Oh, that was when he was probably 16 years old. He started working in a movie theater, and I later found out that it was infested with drugs.
Huh.
And another thing,
please.
he hung around with his older brother. And so he had older kids around him, and they were doing stuff that they shouldn't, drinking, maybe smoking marijuana, nothing bad. And then Robbie was around that young because of that.
Wow. And how did you find that out? Was there an incident, like the police caught him with something, or did you find out on your own, or how would you portray it? How would you explain it?
Gosh, I don't remember.
Okay.
He had, I know he had a car accident, and that may have been how I, found out for sure. And then we arranged for him to go to treatment. He went to a state place, the law. I did a mental hygiene warrant on him, and they put him in a treatment center that was like 2 hours away. And then when he came back from that, he never did straighten up from that one. And then we put him in that Appalachian Teen Challenge.
Okay.
Have you heard of it?
I have not. No.
Okay. It's a religious-based treatment.
Okay.
And he was there for 18 months.
Wow.
And they were doing an experimental treatment where they put 2 or 3 guys in an apartment with one staff member in a community, and they worked. And the staff member kept up with them and stuff. And this was a program they were just implementing, and Robbie was one of the ones they put into it because he was doing so good.
So you think he did well in that atmosphere?
He did very well.
Okay, and what year?
He always did well in a controlled environment.
And what year do you think that was, those 18 months? What years were those, do you think, off the top of your head?
He was 20, so...
So like 1998 or something like that.
Okay.
1998.
You do the math.
Okay, I'm going to do the math this time. Somewhere in there. So late 90s. Okay.
He went in when he was 18. And then when he came out, he was 20. So.
Okay. So how bad would you say? I mean, if it was bad enough that he was going to this for 18 months, I guess you must have thought that his addiction to whatever it was pretty strong.
Right. He was, back then it was mostly opiates. I guess prescription that people would get and sell.
Yeah. Right, getting maybe what they call doctor shopping, getting opiates from different doctors, getting the prescriptions, and that's very, I think it's even popular now, unfortunately, but we know that in the early 2000s it really became a big problem. So I can't say that I'm surprised to hear that if he had an addiction, that's what it was to. Okay. So you got into that. I mean, did you ever experience your son, Robbie, high in one of these, while he was high on this? And how would you say that he was? How did he act?
He would go into rages. I had a pin in my arm. I had broken my wrist, and he grabbed it and threatened that he was going to pull it out, he said, and he threatened to turn over my aquarium, and then other times he would pass out, and it would scare me. I would think he was going to die, and so I would have to wake him up, and there was a time when he did that, and I couldn't wake him up, and I called my daughter, and she came, and she raked the key across the palm of his hand and woke him up.
Wow.
Yeah. She's a nurse, so she was in nursing school at the time, so I guess maybe that's how she knew to do that.
Okay. All right, so when he would be on the drugs, he would have this anger going on, but when he wasn't like that.
Right.
Okay.
It was like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, the difference.
Okay. And so through the 2000s, he went to this rehab, got out. I mean, of course, we know that he had his first son in 2004. How were those 10 years, like 2000 to 2010? How was his addiction during that time?
He battled it all through that time. He would have, I would say, the most periods of sobriety he had then was like and then he got in trouble and went to jail in Virginia.
What did he do?
And he was driving, and he pulled off on the side of the road and passed out, and he had drug paraphernalia on him.
Oh,
okay. And they found some pills in his pocket.
Okay. All right. So he goes to jail for a time. He gets out. Do you think that his wife, Emily, was aware of all of this when they became a couple and got married? Was he upfront with her about all of this?
No. When he met her, he was sober, and I don't think he told her about the extent of it. And he also had hepatitis by this time that he met Emily, the one that you get from the needle.
Yeah.
And he didn't tell her about that until later.
Okay. All right, so they get married, and eventually she does, of course, find out about it. And but you had told me that, at least while he was married for a time, though, he did remain sober for quite a while.
Right, for years. I mean, I'd say probably a year and a half was his max.
Okay.
That he was able to stay sober.
Okay. So, and during this time, regarding his work, you had already mentioned this, but he was having problems keeping jobs because of this?
Yes.
Wow.
Every job he had, he lost due to drugs.
All right.
Whether he had it for a year or whether,
Mm-hmm. Okay. So he's married, he has one child and has another child, but his work history is off and on because of not being able to stay sober and going back to the addiction. When he was married, and these years later, was it opiates again, or was it heroin? What was it? Was it meth? By
the time he was it was heroin. By then.
Okay.
And then later on, as it got harder to get, he would do the other stuff also. The methamphetamines and crack cocaine, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. It had to be very hard for you, Becky.
Oh God, you don't know it. Well, I had to file bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
Because of it, for the things that, like I helped him get the car, and I ended up having to pay for it, and just all kinds of different things.
All right. Yep, there's certainly collateral damage when grown adults get addictions. There's all sorts of collateral damage of other people who are trying to take care of them, and a lot of these addicts, they just keep doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. Did you ever have a chance to talk to his wife, Emily, about all of this? And you had told me that sometimes, told you that sometimes Robert could get so messed up that he didn't even know his name. He didn't even know who he was.
Well, that just happened that one time, right before he went missing. And he was taking a lot of the methamphetamines and doing the crack cocaine too.
All right, so I guess he had a dealer. He'd go out and get this stuff and do it. It's essentially what.
And he had lost his driver's license, and he didn't have a driver's license for 17 years. And then he finally got it back. He had just gotten his driver's license back.
Before he disappeared.
I'd say he may have had it a year.
Okay.
And my husband passed away, and I was able to get his truck, and I gave Robbie my husband's truck. That was the truck that
he went missing in.
He was driving, yeah.
Okay. If you can talk for her, if you feel comfortable doing this, we should know that even though Emily was married to Robbie, she was not into drugs, correct?
Right. She drank.
She was
is the only thing.
Okay.
And a lot of times, Robbie would think, okay, I'm fine. I've been sober for this long. I should be able to have a glass of beer or a glass of wine, with my wife.
Right.
And it would start out that way, and it would be a very slow progression. And even she would say, "Oh, okay, that's fine," because she didn't have the disease,
Yeah.
And so a lot of times his relapses were caused by that.
Yeah. Yep, we talk about it a lot. People think, we do talk about drugs a lot on this program, and we have a lot of addicts who go missing, and we have a lot of recovered addicts who have gone missing. I mean, both categories. And there is the idea that some of them think because they've been sober for a long time, they can go back to their old ways and it won't be addictive, but it exactly is, for sure.
Right.
For sure. Okay, so this is going on. He's trying to get sober. And how long do you think he had been, unfortunately, gone back to doing drugs before he disappeared in December 2018? How long had he been gone back on them?
He had to be. It had to be only a matter of maybe a month, or gotten really bad the last 2 weeks, because I saw him 2 weeks before he disappeared.
Okay. So you're saying that sometime he was sober for at least the majority of 2018, and then we get to roughly November, and then for some reason he just decided he was going to start doing it again.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that his wife knew that, once again, your impression, do you think that she knew that he had started doing this again?
Yes.
She did. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about these days and weeks before. Like you said, he had unfortunately gone back to his addiction. You said you saw him a couple weeks before he disappeared. When was the last time that you actually talked to him? And what was that conversation? What was the conversation about, if you can say? How did he seem to be doing?
Okay, it was like 2 weeks before December the 9th, and I should have looked it up to see the exact date, but we would celebrate our Thanksgivings on the weekend because that's when everybody could get together, and that's the time we picked to celebrate our Thanksgiving. So we were at my daughter's house in Tennessee, and mostly what we talked about was our beach trip. We always celebrated New Year's together. And when it started out, we met at my daughter's. My daughter's was 2 hours from him, and then it was 2 hours from me and Jamie, his oldest brother. So we would meet there, and then we decided, well, let's go somewhere and celebrate it. And we looked into all different places, and we decided on the beach. So we had been 2 years in a row, and it was coming up on the third year, and I had reservations, and the room was paid for, and some people were saying, "Oh, I don't want to go," and I was like, "Well, maybe I should cancel the reservations." And Robbie was like, "No, Mom, you can't do that. You can't do that. We need to go. We need to be there. Just hold tight. Everybody will decide to go." So that was mainly what our conversation was about that time.
When you were talking to him, did you already realize that he had gone back to doing drugs? Did you know that at that time?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
All right. So when you got,
he had been to a clinic and gotten on Suboxone, and I knew he was taking that, so I thought he was safe because I know a lot of people that take that and they're good. But I don't see how he could have been taking it like he was supposed to, and then do what happened.
Yeah. Okay. I understand. So this trip, just to give everybody an idea, so was it going to be Robbie, his wife Emily, and their children and other people?
Right. It was going to be Robbie, Emily, Abigail, Riley, and Isaac. Isaac always went.
Okay.
And then my daughter and her stepdaughter and her husband, and then her youngest daughter, which She would have been 4 at the time.
Wow.
And then Robbie's daughters were close in age with her.
Yeah.
And then me and my oldest son and his daughter, who was close in age with my daughter and Robbie, they were all close.
That's like 12 people or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
All
And
right.
then normally my 2 older grandsons would go, but they weren't going to go that year. We had a 4-bedroom condo, and it was the same one we had gotten the year before because we really liked it so much.
Wow. Sounds like a great time.
It was. It was wonderful.
Okay. So all of this big family get together. Not too many families get to go on trips like that, but it sounds like a great time. And in talking to Robbie, he was excited about going. And just to be clear, how many days roughly was this before he disappeared?
Like 14.
Like 2 weeks before.
Right.
So you didn't talk to him for like 2 weeks.
Right.
Was that?
And that was not unusual.
Okay.
He wasn't the type to call every day or, you know.
Did you talk to his wife during that time?
No.
All right.
Emily and I weren't really close. It wasn't anything. There wasn't any dislike or anything. We just weren't. We were uncomfortable around each other. Maybe.
Okay.
They were in Danville, and she had her family that helped, and maybe there was some resentment because I didn't help as much, like with the children.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but her and my daughter were very close, like sisters.
All right.
So any information I get from Emily usually comes through my daughter.
All right. Well, it's interesting you bring that up because let's now move up to that time. And what we're going to do, just so the listeners understand, we're going to explain this the way Becky found out all of this. We're not going to do in like a timeline as if this happened in history going from one day to the next. We're going to go and I'm going to ask Becky about all of this according to how she found out everything. And so we'll kind of go forward and then back again. So you don't hear from Robbie for 2 weeks. You're getting ready for this family trip and everything, and just out of nowhere on the 13th, that's what I have here. Of course, if it's wrong, you can correct it. Out of nowhere, you hadn't heard from Robbie, hadn't heard from Emily, but thought everything was fine. You get a call from your daughter, and what does she say?
Okay, actually, it was a text.
Okay.
And she said, all it said was, "Have you heard from Robbie?"
Okay.
And my whole world just come to a stop because I knew.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew. And she didn't really want to tell me because she wasn't sure of anything.
Mm-hmm. So after you got that text, and was it, if you can remember, I think in our prior conversation you said it was the 13th. I mean, that's what I have written down. It was December 13th. Okay, so.
Yes, because it was my grandson's birthday.
Okay. And when you got that text, did you then call your daughter back to find out, what was going on and everything, or what went on from there once you said to her, "No, I haven't heard from him"? What happened from there?
Well, eventually, we did talk, but we texted back and forth a little bit to start with, and then I talked to her, and she told me that Emily hadn't heard from him, and that they had found his truck in a ditch. And
okay. Did she, once again in my notes, and I don't mind maybe, just going from my notes, just maybe to spark your memory a little bit. So the way I understand this then is what you found out was that Emily had kicked Robbie out of the house?
Right. That was the time that he didn't recognize who she was. He acted as though he were at somebody's house getting ready to do some work. And he thought Emily was, he didn't even know he was at his house.
Oh, my.
And he thought Emily was the person he was there to work for.
The client, the homeowner.
Right. But he was at his house.
Oh, my gosh.
And then it was, maybe not right then, but like within a day that she told him, "It's over. I can't do it anymore. I've done it for years and years and years, and I just can't do it anymore. Leave."
And so she asked him to leave. She just said, Robbie, I think you're going to have to get out of here.
Right.
Okay. Just to be clear, because I have to ask this, was there any violence? Did the police have to show up? Because we know that often happens when things like this happen. But Robbie did just leave. There wasn't any fist thrown or anything like that, to your knowledge?
Right. This time, no. There had been before, and I'm not sure when. I think maybe she had called the police on him twice.
Okay.
So she had reason to want him to leave. She knew what it could go to.
Yeah. So she's saying that he left, and we're not saying, and everybody should know there's no suspicion that his wife has anything to do with his disappearance. I just want everybody to know this.
None whatsoever.
Before the listeners start, getting suspicious of all this. But she kicked him out of the house, or he left, willingly on December 9th?
Yes.
December 9th.
And it was Sunday morning.
Okay. So he leaves on Sunday morning. He leaves driving his truck. And so then she tries to, Emily, the wife, doesn't hear from him. She tries to contact him, can't reach him. A few days later, she talks to your daughter, and then your daughter talks to you. And, this all starts going that nobody's heard from Robbie. What do you do after the 13th? How quick is it that the police get involved? What do you do at that point that nobody that has heard from Robbie in a few days? What do you do?
Well, we encourage Emily to go to the police, which she had already done, and I think maybe she went to the Danville police, and they told her she could not file a missing persons report on him. And then once she talked to my daughter and me, we encouraged her to go again, and she found out she needed to go to the county sheriff's department or something.
Okay.
And finally, it was on the 14th that they filed a missing person report and did the first search around where his truck was found with dogs.
Okay, we'll get into how the truck was found in here in a moment.
Okay.
I just want to ask you right at this point, being that there seems, at least for a day or something, that they didn't want to take a missing persons report, do you think a factor in that was because maybe the police knew Robbie, because of his drug activity, or they knew that he was in jail? Was that a factor in this, or was it not, in your opinion?
I don't think he was ever in trouble with the law in Danville, ever.
Okay.
So I think maybe Emily might have mentioned he was on drugs or something when she went to file the report.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that's a factor in why they didn't want to file the report.
Yeah.
Because he was on drugs.
Okay. When you talk to your daughter, and eventually maybe when you talk to Emily as well, being that she was the last person we trust who saw him, did she have an opinion on where he could have gone? Being that she was kicking him out, did he say anything, I'm going to go over to this guy's house, or anything like that? Did she know where he was going to go at all?
No, she didn't.
She had no idea whatsoever.
No, and see, it was almost like he lived two lives,
Mm-hmm.
He had Emily and the family and their friends, and then he had his, let's call them underworld friends. And Emily didn't know any of them.
Right.
So she knew about them. She knew he had them, but she didn't associate with them.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying, Becky, is that when Robbie was getting his drugs, he was going out of the house. It wasn't like anybody was showing up at the house.
Right. No, he left to do it.
He left to do it.
Well, he had it. At least he cared that much about his daughters. He didn't want it there.
Okay. All right. So the police get the report on the 14th. And you already mentioned Robbie's truck that was eventually found, but I think I want to do the rest of this case in this fashion. So the police start, they take the report, they get Emily's story on what happened. How does this guy, Bob, and we'll just use his first name, how does he enter this disappearance?
Okay, Bob is the one that called Emily and told her that Robbie's truck was in a ditch on what road it was on. And so Emily called the police, and they met her at the truck.
So Bob, he knew Robbie?
Yes.
Okay. And
he went to the same Suboxone clinic that Robbie went to.
Okay, so that's how they knew each other. Any idea how long they'd known each other?
I would say at least 6 months.
Okay, so sometime in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Bob, where does we just need to be clear maybe about a few things. Emily and Robbie lived in what town or city?
Ringgold, Virginia.
Okay. And where did Bob live?
He lived right across the border in North Carolina. I'm not sure of the town's name.
Okay. All right, so they lived in Ringgold, but I just have to ask, I know that the town of Chatham, Virginia, is a name that pops up quite prominently in Robbie's disappearance. Why is that town mentioned? Do you know?
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not real familiar with the area.
Okay. That's fine.
And it's frustrating because if I knew if it was here, I would be out looking, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's not. It's 3.5 hours away.
Right. You do not live in Virginia. We don't have to get into where you live, but you do not live in that area.
Right.
Okay. So Bob, your understanding is this Bob guy, he voluntarily called the police to say that Robbie's truck was right near his house?
No, he called Emily.
He called Emily and told her.
Yes.
Just out of the blue.
Out of the blue.
Okay. And so, being that he does that.
Oh no! Wait a minute.
Okay.
He went to their house and left a note on the door with his phone number.
All right. So.
And she called him,
mm-hmm.
and he told her about the truck.
Wow. Okay.
In the meantime, there's a big snowstorm, and there's like 18 inches of snow in Danville.
And so he drove through a snowstorm to go leave a message on Emily's door.
Well, the snowstorm happened the day Robbie went missing on the night.
He did. Okay.
And he didn't go to Emily's until the 13th.
Okay. So he didn't call her. Maybe he didn't have her number, but this note ends up on her door right around the same time that she's starting to realize that Robbie's missing, and he says his name is Bob, and that Robbie's truck is a mile down the road, from what I read on Goodyear Boulevard, down the road from where he lived.
Right, within a mile of where Bob lives.
Okay. And so, did the police go and talk to Bob?
Yes.
And what story does he tell them?
He told them that Robbie was at his house, and I don't know if he told Emily that Robbie was at his house, and he injected heroin and overdosed. And because they went to the Suboxone clinic, they had to carry Narcan on them, and that he gave Robbie Narcan and brought him out of the overdose.
Wow.
And he woke up in a rage because he is having severe withdrawal.
Mm-hmm.
And he just, like in a rage, gets in his truck and leaves.
That was the story that Bob told Emily, and we take for granted that he told the police the same thing, that
right.
Robbie overdosed, Bob brought him back to life, Robbie's mad or angry, like you said he could get when you saw him on drugs, and
right.
he took off in his truck, and Bob says he never saw him again.
Right.
All right, and the truck then was found a mile from Bob's house.
Right.
Okay. All right, I'm sure, when I think of something like this, I think of the movie Pulp Fiction, when Uma Thurman overdoses and they bring her back to life. John Travolta brings her back to life by putting a needle under her chest. That's what I think of. I have no experience with this at all, but to maybe the listeners, if they're wondering, what that is, That's what I think of. I don't think it's exactly like that. I think that's a Hollywood.
Right. See, for the longest time, I thought, well, Bob had to have injected him with a needle, but it's not. It's a nasal spray.
Right.
And I've also been told since then that it doesn't just automatically bring you back. That it'll wake you up, and then you fall back into the overdose, and it has to be administered again, and sometimes as much as 4 to 6 times.
Wow.
It has to be re-administered.
Okay. So Bob's telling the story of how he brought Robbie back to life, then Robbie took off. However, Bob did note that Robbie left his wallet at Bob's.
Right. And just his wallet. And he left some clothes there because when he got to Bob's, he had already been in a ditch somewhere and got out of the ditch, and his clothes were wet. So Bob gave him some dry clothes. See, we didn't know what Robbie was wearing for a long time because of that.
Okay. All right. And the other interesting part of this, at least what you told me, Becky, in our prior conversations, that Bob didn't live alone. He lived with his parents.
Right. But they're very elderly.
And to your knowledge, did the police talk to the parents to back up Bob's story? Do you know anything about that?
As far as I know, they did not. I do know that they went to Bob's house initially and interviewed him, and then Emily kept putting pressure on him, so they did something, a wellness check, and was able to take Bob into the station, the wellness check on his parents, and they re-interviewed him and didn't have anything to charge him with, so they let him go. Okay.
We'll come back to Bob a little bit later. All right, so I guess Bob told the truth because he left this note, and what do you know? Robbie's truck was found a mile down the road from Bob's. And, can you already talked about this snowstorm. Do you know why it took 3 days for somebody to run across Robbie's truck, sitting on the side of the road, especially if Bob lived right down the street? It took a few days, didn't it?
Yes. I would say maybe they were snowed in until, then.
Okay, could be.
Yeah.
All right, and...
Now, I do know somebody contacted us finally I did a story and put it on Facebook. And I got, a lot of responses. And one guy said that he had seen Robbie's truck on Monday morning when he went to work. Or Monday or Tuesday. I don't remember for sure.
And we have to remember, as you've already explained, that Emily kicked him out on a Sunday morning.
Yes.
All right, so maybe that makes sense. He leaves there, he goes to Bob, this all happens, he takes off. He decides to pull over to the side of the road for some reason, and the truck's left there, and then somebody sees it on the next day, Monday.
No, it was in the ditch. It couldn't. It had to be towed out.
All right, in the ditch. Somebody sees it in the ditch. The next day on Monday, when somebody's going to work.
Yes.
All right. All right. So that maybe makes sense. Okay. Any forensics done on the truck? To your knowledge, I know you weren't there. Anything in the truck that seemed unusual? Once again, to your knowledge, did the police ever tell you anything like that?
No, the police wouldn't talk to me.
Okay.
Because I didn't have the same last name as him, I guess. I don't know, because I was not his wife. It was very frustrating.
Well, if they talked to her, has she ever told you anything?
There was a reason why they couldn't do fingerprints, but I don't remember what it was.
So, as far as you can understand, once again, this disappearance isn't quite 2 years old yet, but to your knowledge, there was no forensics done on the truck at all.
Right.
Okay. Do you know what was left in the truck? What Robbie's items were in the truck at all? Anything?
Everything he owned, like all of his tools and stuff, were still in the truck, in the back of the truck, and he had a lot of nice tools. And normally he would pawn them, he would get so desperate he would pawn all this stuff.
Yeah.
But it was all just left there.
I have to ask, were there any drugs in the truck?
No.
Okay. He left his wallet at Bob's. Was his, and we'll get to the phone here in a moment, phone found in the truck?
No.
Robbie's phone not in the truck.
No.
So he's missing, his phone's missing. Anything else of his possessions would you say that are missing?
His car keys.
The car
the truck
keys. The truck keys weren't in the truck either. Okay.
No.
Was the truck damaged? I know they had to pull it out of the ditch. Was it damaged? Anything wrong?
It was not damaged beyond control. I mean, beyond somebody being able to drive it, because a neighbor purchased it from her.
So they gave it back to Emily.
Yeah, she had it towed to the house.
So she got it back fairly quickly.
Yes.
Like within
That
24
same
hours.
day.
The same day that it was found in the ditch, they brought it back to Emily's.
Yes.
Wow. We hear this is something, if I may just say this for a moment, this is something that I'm never going to understand in disappearances at all. I know that drives the listeners nuts. It drives me nuts that law enforcement is so quick to want to return these vehicles to people. I just don't get it. I just don't.
I know.
And granted, we have our suspicions about Robbie's disappearance, and I'm sure the listeners will, but there are certainly disappearances where it's even been more obvious that somebody just didn't walk away, and still the police just returned trucks and cars, as if they were just stolen or something, and it just boggles my mind. Okay, so she gets it back, and then she eventually sells it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, she told me the neighbor wanted to buy it. I just assumed that he did.
Okay. All right, and does that neighbor still have the truck?
I don't know.
You don't know.
She doesn't live there anymore.
Okay.
She was afraid.
Emily was?
She was afraid to stay there. One day she came home and Bob was there in the driveway. And he was at Robbie's truck and he was leaning on it and he was like talking out of his head and just be like, I'm so sorry, Emily, I hate you're going through this, and wanting to know what was going on, and it really scared her. So she moved in with her parents until she could find a place.
You hadn't told me about that before, Becky, that Bob actually showed up at Emily's house sometime after Robbie disappeared.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, I'm not asking you to apologize. I will certainly want to talk about this. No, you don't have to apologize. Okay, you don't have to apologize, but I'm just saying that I want to talk about this now.
Okay.
How long after Robbie disappeared did this happen, to your knowledge?
It was within a week. It was pretty fresh.
Huh. So, it's interesting to me. He went over there to put a message on their house that the truck was there. How did Bob even know where Robbie lived? Had he been there before? Do you even know?
I don't know. My assumption was that they went to the clinic together and maybe Robbie had to stop by the house and get something, or
okay.
And Bob was with him.
That's certainly possible. Okay. And so he just kind of pops in a week later. Here she is, worried out of her mind about Robbie, and Bob shows up. Just
right.
Waiting.
Right.
And he's asking questions. Would you say, once again, you weren't there, but your understanding is that he was asking questions about the investigation into Robbie's disappearance?
Right.
Okay.
And then I think that's the time that he told her about the altercation Robbie had with these supposed Mexican drug people.
We'll get into that. Okay. We'll go back to Bob, but you had never told me about this, so I wanted to make sure we put this in the timeline somewhere. And so that freaked Emily out, and she says, I'm getting the heck out of here.
Right.
I can understand why. Okay. All right. Now, we did establish that the phone that he had is also missing to this day. But I think it was Emily, Robbie's wife, that actually got the phone records. You have them. You've sent them to me, and I've looked at them, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But any phone calls, once again, the way you looked at the records, any phone calls that Robbie made to anybody after Emily kicked him out of the house?
Yes, there were several phone calls up until at 5:30, I think, was the last phone call.
5:30 in the afternoon of that Sunday.
Yes, I think.
All right.
I don't have them in front of me.
That's fine. So after he got kicked out, he was talking to people, communicating with people.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, and the listeners should know that and we're not going to name the names, but you sent them to me. I have the ability to check people's phone numbers and find out who owns those numbers, at least currently. Of course, we know that you go back 10 years, somebody could have the phone number that somebody has now. But I got some of those numbers. You didn't have names to put with those numbers. First of all, have you tried to contact any of those people, or have you had anybody else try to contact any of the people whose names I got for you?
Yes, Emily did call.
Okay.
And she had already talked to one of them. I'm not sure which one, but
okay.
It supposedly was somebody it was that girl that he was on Facebook with and stuff. And she had even got in contact with Emily over Facebook and asked about Robbie.
Okay.
If anybody ever found him or whatever. And then the other phone numbers were where people had gotten the phone number because it wasn't in use anymore.
All right. So what you're saying is between him disappearing in late 2018 and let's say when I got these names and numbers for you maybe a month ago, we're doing this interview on September 4th, 2020, maybe a month ago, those numbers went to other people.
Right.
Okay. But one of those people on the list that we put the name with the number did admit to knowing Robbie.
Now, say that again.
The one woman though on the list there, you called her, Emily called her, and she did admit to knowing Robbie.
Yes.
And she knew he was missing.
Yes.
Okay. Did Emily or you ever heard of? Once again, we're not using her name. Had you or Emily ever heard of her before?
Before you gave me the name?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
From right after he, went missing,
okay.
And it was through Facebook that she contacted Emily and asked about Robbie.
Okay. And off the top of my head, I think there were 3 or 4 numbers that were a question mark. So what you're saying is one of the people knew Robbie, and the rest of those numbers, the people were saying that they got the number after Robbie disappeared.
Right.
Okay, so there's that. I think, I'll just say this publicly, I think that we also have to remember that these people could be lying. We don't know.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we don't know. I don't have the ability to see when number went from one person to another, but we have to keep that open as a possibility. It's just
right.
the way it is. Okay. So we have these phone records, and the last call was on 5:30 in the afternoon on that Sunday, and nothing after that.
Right.
Okay. Now, there was a ping. They did ping the phone, and where did the phone last ping?
It pinged in Ruffin, North Carolina.
And that's not where Bob lives, though, right?
Right.
Okay.
And the town has a bad name for drugs.
Okay.
And thugs.
Okay. That's not where Emily though, and they lived in Virginia, correct? They didn't live in
right.
Okay. Did you know or Emily in the past year and 8-9 months had she ever been to Ruffin? Had she known Robbie ever to go to Ruffin, North Carolina?
No.
Okay. Now, what's interesting, though, is this woman that you called who admitted knowing Robbie, she lives in Ruffin, right?
She does?
Does,
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay,
Mm-mm.
all right, because I should establish that at least one of those numbers that I was able to track down and see what name was attached to the number, that person lived in Ruffin. One of those last calls that he made, or was made to him, and I don't have the records in front of me either, was made to or is from somebody who lives in Ruffin, North Carolina. So I have to double check and see if that's actually the woman who says she knew Robbie or not. But I thought that's something that it really stuck out to me. But either way, Robbie, to your knowledge, to Emily's knowledge, didn't know anybody there.
Right.
Okay. And once again, to establish, Bob didn't live in Ruffin either.
No.
Okay. Do you know when this ping happened? Did the police or Emily tell you when his phone did ping there?
No, it was. I don't know.
Okay.
It was.
Mhm.
I don't know. Nobody ever told me. I don't guess.
Okay, because the way you're explaining it to me and to the audience, who's we're recording this, but they're not listening to this, is that there's nothing in this timeline that you said so far where Robbie would have had time to go to Ruffin. It sounds to me like he went directly from his own house when he got kicked out. He went to Bob's, and then he drove a mile down the road, and that was that.
Right.
And what did he do? Walk to Ruffin, which I don't think was conceivable, especially since there was a snowstorm. So, so there's something going on there with his phone pinging in a different place from where he was last seen, many miles. And listeners should know I will do a map and video on YouTube for this, so that this can all be explained. All right, so we have this phone information that's, I wouldn't say extensive, but I think it certainly paints a little bit more of the picture. All right, but we don't know why his phone would have pinged in Ruffin when it doesn't seem like Robbie was ever near there. Were dogs used to do any searches when the truck was found up and down the road, into the woods, if there are any woods, anything like that? What did they do?
Yes, they did. They brought dogs that day and searched, and then a couple of days later, at Emily's insistence, and we were asking for horses. They've got this new horse thing where horses go out, but the police have to request it. They didn't want to do that, so they took the dogs back out. And they were supposed to do a flyover with what's that little thing that flies and takes pictures?
A drone.
Yeah, they were supposed to do the drone, and the drone malfunctioned that day. And to my knowledge, they never went back with the drone.
Okay. Have you been to the area where the truck was in the ditch, Becky?
No.
You have not. Okay. Has anybody explained to you, like the terrain? Are there a lot of woods there? Is it fairly wide open, or what?
Yes. Isaac's mother, Mindy, went on Google Maps and found the place, and it showed pictures of the terrain and like houses and buildings around it, and she thought maybe he had went into some building, one of the buildings there, and gotten locked in and couldn't get out. But she was just going from a Google Map picture. I don't think anything was. They weren't searched or anything.
Okay, I'm just asking where his truck was found in the ditch. Is it like in a residential area, or is it like on a country road where like the
It's an interstate, but it's mostly country. There's woods, a lot of woods around, and not houses sporadically.
Okay.
And then down at the end of the road, maybe 500 feet, was a convenience store. And the dogs, I think, tracked him to there, to the convenience store. But nobody in the convenience store saw him, and their cameras were not working.
It's amazing how many times that happens. Okay, so these dogs did pick up some type of scent, allegedly, but we have to remember there was a snowstorm between the truck being left there and when the dogs were used, and the listeners already know how I feel about dogs. But They allegedly followed his scent down to this convenience store, but this does sound like an area that if it was Robbie and he did leave his truck, he could have run off into the woods and nobody could have seen him.
Right.
It's possible.
Right. I worried myself sick that he froze to death, or it just him being out in the woods and.
Yeah. Right. I can understand that, Becky. I can't blame you for that. I'm sure you continue to think about that to this day.
I do.
I get it. I understand. All right, so we have Robbie going over there. Bob says then he stormed off. Truck's found a mile down the road. Snowstorm happens. Bob's the one that lets Emily know that the truck is a mile down the road. There, he goes over and leaves a message. Dogs are brought in. Sounds like a little bit of a search was done, but probably not big enough for that type of terrain, at least the way you're explaining to me.
Right.
And once again, is this happening in Virginia or North Carolina?
Virginia.
Okay, so
but the North Carolina's not far away.
Mm-hmm.
It's like right on the border.
All right, but Bob lived in North Carolina.
Right.
It does seem that there are a lot of jurisdictions here at play. You've already stated how Emily went to file with the local police, and they said she had to go to the sheriff's office. And then we have seemingly Robbie going into North Carolina, and then his truck being found back in Virginia. But I just want to make sure everybody understands these locations. Is that he and his wife, Emily, lived in Ringgold, Virginia, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so she kicks him out of Ringgold, and then he goes down to Bob's place, which is, although we are unsure right at this time where Bob lived, it was just barely over the border into North Carolina.
Yes.
Okay. And then when Robbie's truck was found, it was found on Goodyear Boulevard, just back into Virginia in Pittsylvania, not Pennsylvania, but Pittsylvania County.
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm also looking at this right now that the jurisdiction that is responsible for his disappearance is Pittsylvania County Sheriff's Office.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That clears that all up. Very good. Okay. So let's talk about Bob a little bit more. Has he ever stated, to your knowledge, being that he went over to talk to Emily a week after this all happened, did he ever state where he thought Robbie was going when Robbie left his house?
To get more drugs.
And where would that have been?
I don't know. To meet somebody, I would say.
Okay. Now, you'd already brought this up, but I'll bring it up again for you. Now, Bob does have his own theory, and it had to do with a cartel. How did this even pop up? Where did it come from? Please explain.
Okay, Robbie had an altercation with some drug dealers. They picked him off for $60, and Robbie called him out in public and demanded his money back. And they refused, but it was a very public place, and he jumped up on the hood of their car and was screaming at them, and just to shut him up, they gave him $40 of the $60. So they were mad at him and out to get him.
All right, is there any facts to this, or is this just a story that Bob is telling everybody?
As far as I know, it's a story that Bob's telling everybody.
Okay, so there's no facts regarding this. There aren't any videos of this. To your knowledge, Robbie never told anybody else about this. He never told Emily about this. The police have no records about this, anything like that. This is just a story that Bob's putting out there.
Right.
And is Bob then saying this is something Robbie told him, or is Bob admitting that he was there when it happened?
I don't think he was there. Robbie just told him about it.
Okay.
And it happened like just days before.
And where does Bob? I don't know what to think of this, but where does Bob claim that this happened?
It was in a town. I mean, it was like there were stores and stuff around. It was a populated place.
So you don't know if this happened in Ringgold. You don't know if this happened in Danville. You don't know if this happened down where Bob lived. I'm not blaming you. You just don't know.
I just don't know.
All right. So Bob, either he left that out of the story or kind of got lost in translation. But this is his story that I guess what he's saying is after Robbie left his house, somebody ran into this Mexican cartel, and that's what happened.
Right. I would say my opinion is that he called them to get drugs. He was desperate. Told them where he was to come meet him. And they got him.
Okay. Well, we don't like to do any theorizing on the
Right.
program, but all I'm trying to establish is this is the story that
facts.
Bob's telling, but
Right.
he's never offered up any proof that happened. That's just something allegedly that Robbie told him.
Right.
Has anybody else, being that Robbie had other friends and probably other friends that did drugs with him, probably this woman who admitted knowing that he was missing, probably she was probably doing drugs and knew him. That's probably how they knew each other. Has anybody else besides Bob ever aired this story in the last almost 2 years?
No.
Okay. I think the listeners can tell that I have huge doubts about that story. And we also have to remember Bob went over to Emily's and was acting kooky enough that Emily wanted to, took off, took her children,
Right.
took in her and Robbie's children and moved out. So Bob might just be prone to, he's probably doing drugs too. So I don't know if we can take his word or not. Okay, so we have Bob. We have him living with his parents, and his parents, we just don't know. Here it sounds like he's saving Robbie's life while his parents are under the same roof, right there on a Sunday afternoon, which sounds really weird. And then he's saying that Robbie took off. Trucks found a mile down the road, just happens to be back in Virginia. Bob goes over to Emily's, and it's very possible that Robbie did run off. Sound like he was enraged or having some sort of episode when he left Bob's, and it very well may be that he could still be out there. I'm just not sure. What's this been like for you, Becky? It seems that my perception is you knew about Robbie's drug use for a long time. I'm guessing that, of course, you worried about this for a very long time. I don't know if you ever could have predicted that maybe that could be connected to him eventually going missing. But what's this been like for you the last year and 9 months?
It's been horrible. I lost my husband in 2016, and I would tell Robbie, don't do this. I won't survive if something happens to you. And I literally begged him, to stay, to think of your children. I mean, I had the conversation with him, and it's been so hard.
How, as you said that your daughter is a nurse, how has it affected her? How has it affected your other son?
Well, my daughter had severe depression, and she decided to talk to a counselor, and they diagnosed her with that post-traumatic stress disorder because of Robbie missing. And it worries my son to death.
What do they think? Once again, we don't do theories on here, but have they ever offered up their own opinions on what happened to Robbie?
Well, you always want to hope that he's out there somewhere.
Yeah.
I think my son deals with it by thinking that he ran off and is living a wonderful life somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter, she just don't know. She tries to talk about it, and she just starts crying and can't talk about it.
Yeah. Have the police, once again, we don't get into theories, but I will take their word on this. Have the police ever offered up any theories to you or to Emily regarding Robbie's disappearance? Have they ever told you, just for an example, we believe that Bob did something to Robbie? Have they ever stated something explicit, or have they just never said anything?
No, they told Emily that they did not think Bob had anything to do with it.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And then they've not offered any theories as to what they thought might have happened.
Okay. And what you're also saying during this interview is that they had some search plans that they didn't follow through on.
Right.
They were going to do this drone, and that didn't work out. They had the dogs there, but that seems like it was about it. Did they ever get a large group of searchers together, cadets or somebody like that, to go walking around the area where the truck was found?
No.
No. Okay. So this is another situation. We've had a couple disappearances like this recently where people have gone missing, and it's been a few years, and still there's not been what my assistants would call, and probably listeners call an adequate search, where you get a large group of people together to at least rule out the idea that Robbie his remains. I'm not trying to be morbid, but that to rule out the idea that his remains are in the immediate area. Because once you could do that, then you have to start thinking about maybe foul play or something. But
right.
It just doesn't seem like that's been done yet, and probably it needs to be done, even though I know that's not easy to do. Okay. Do you have a website or Facebook page set up for Robbie's disappearance? Help find Robert Hurt?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the Facebook page, are you a manager on there, an administrator on there, Becky?
I think I am, but I've never done anything. I don't know how.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the Aware Foundation?
Sure.
He's the one that set it up for me.
Okay, great. And it is called Help Find Robert Hurt?
Yes.
Okay. And I will surely link to that before this episode comes out. I'll also be doing a video and a map so people can understand some of these locations, and going back and forth between North Carolina and Virginia. Do you happen to know, maybe I'll ask this before we complete this interview, any idea what Bob has done with his life since this all happened? Any ideas?
No.
Anybody
No.
keep any tabs on him? Anything?
When the Aware Foundation did they set up at a grocery store, and the media came and did interviews with the family. My ex-husband and Emily's father on that day, and this was a couple of months after his disappearance. It was still cold, so they went to see Bob, and
Okay.
Bob convinced them that he wasn't involved.
Huh. Well, that's something, although we just have to understand that, no offense to these men, but they're not expert, interrogators, and
Right.
of course they don't have any experience with missing persons case. I appreciate it. I think that's proactive and everything, but we just have to remember that.
Right.
Okay, so he went down, and Bob convinced them, at least, that he had nothing to do with Robbie's disappearance.
Right.
Okay. Well, listeners can take that for what it's worth. That Bob even offered to talk to them, I guess, is something. I guess that's a step in the right direction instead of him just blowing them off.
Right.
Okay. Any last words, Becky, before we complete this interview?
No.
Okay. Well, as I told you, as I've told many guests, this is just the beginning of us knowing each other, Becky. That until Robbie is found, whether he's deceased or alive, I want to keep working with you on this. You can email me or call me anytime. I'll, of course, as a reporter, move on to other disappearances, but I want you to know that myself and my assistants, anything that we can do for you, we'll do that. Need any advice? Of course, there's a lot of kooks out there. There are a lot of people who are trying to take your money with scams and things like that. You come to us. Okay? Any of those people, you think you get any funny feelings, people calling you, emailing you, you let us know. You let me know.
Okay.
You let my assistant Emily know, and we'll talk to you about this. You don't do anything before you talk to us. Of course, we work for free. All right, because we want to always support you. We want to help you make good decisions.
Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Yes.
Well,
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, and I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
My pleasure.
And that was my interview with Becky Griffith, mother of Robbie Hurt. I thank her for joining me and all of you on the program. There's a video now playing on YouTube regarding Robbie's disappearance. I point out the various locations mentioned during the interview. This is one of those disappearances where the alleged evidence could take us in a variety of different directions. Given what Robbie's own wife said, he could forget who he was while on drugs. And I don't think his wife has any reason to lie about that. So it's conceivable that Robbie drove into that ditch and ran off. And he's somewhere out there alive, not knowing who he is. Possible. On the other hand, that Robbie even got out of Bob's house is hard to believe. No, it's not hard to believe that Robbie overdosed at Bob's. What is hard to believe is that Bob just happened to have Narcan there to save Robbie. That certainly was convenient, if it even happened. However, if it did happen, then I can't figure out a reason Bob would then lie about anything else, including the Mexican cartel story. Because really, that story has lie written all over it. Then there's the phone ping in Ruffin, North Carolina. Nowhere close to where Bob lived, nowhere close to where Robbie lived, nowhere close to where they found Robbie's truck. Yet, it's a fact. In fact, it's the most solid piece of evidence we have. Because we really don't know if Robbie was at Bob's or not. We don't know if Robbie left his truck where it was found or not. But one way or another, Robbie's phone found its way to Ruffin, North Carolina, with or without Robbie. Moreover, as you heard in the interview, one of the phone numbers that Robbie last dialed that I traced for Becky was a number of a woman in Ruffin, North Carolina. Coincidence? I think not. So, I'm inclined to believe Robbie was in Ruffin with his phone. The problem? It totally contradicts all of Bob's story, leaving me in my own altered state. I'll leave the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.